Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to connect to an Access database using VBA and run a store procedure with a parameter. In a previous video I'll show you what we did. If you go to the Excel VBA SQL and you go to the videos tab all the way down here, if you go all the way down, there's this video here under Microsoft Access. It's a free video and it's called Connect to Access, Update, Insert, Delete. So in that video, what we did is we took this table, here's my table in Access, and we were able to query all this data in Excel using VBA and return it to the worksheet. And then we showed you how to loop through the record set in VBA and how to insert into the table, how to delete from the table, how to update the table. So if you don't know how to update an Access table or delete or insert or even select from an Access table using VBA, then go watch this video, Lesson 24 on Excel VBA SQL.com. We're going to build off that now, and we're going to call a store procedure here. Here's a store procedure called getAmountsParameter. That's a store procedure that if we look at the actual query, let me close this real quick. If we look at the query, this store procedure here, it has a parameter that is of type double, and that parameter has a name amount, and that query says select the company, the business date, and the amount from this company table, which we just saw, where the amount is greater than whatever number you pass in as your amount parameter. So let's look at the table again. Here's our table. You know, it has four fields: ID, company, business date, and amount. And this store procedure, it queries three of the fields. Those fields are the company, the business date, and the amount from the table called company, where the amount is greater than an amount. So if I pass in 400 as my amount parameter, I'm going to get this row back right here, row ID number 1, because this is the only row of data where the amount is greater than 400. That's what this query will do. So if I run this query, I can go down here and I can double click it, and when I double click it, it's running the query and it asks me for a parameter value, and if I put in 400, it's going to say select the company, the business date, and the amount from the company table where the amount is greater than this number here, 400. So if I click OK, I get one row, and it's the row that I just showed you, that it was the first row with company 1, and the amount is 500 right here. Okay, cool. So that's what this store procedure does. And what's important about this store procedure is that it has this parameter here. And I'm not going to go into detail about how to write this. Well, actually, I'll just spend a couple minutes here on how this store procedure came into existence. If I go to design view, all I did down here was when I built the query, I selected the field company, business date, and amount, and then in parentheses, in brackets, I put greater than the word amount, and that's the criteria. That's how I specified, what my SQL statement is going to look like. And then up here under parameters, I specified an amount parameter that is of type double. So I did those two things basically, and that put a parameter in this query. So now I have a query called getAmountsParameter with an amount parameter down here, and then I made it a double up here under this parameters button right there. So once I have that, I have a name of a store procedure. And all a store procedure is, if you're not aware, is a saved query attached to a database. And they're useful because when you want to modify that query, you just simply go to the source in the database and you modify it. You don't need to go into your application and run it. You might build an application in C# or VBA or C++, and you're going to have code in there, and you don't want to write your SQL code in your VBA or C# application. You want to keep your SQL code in the database. And to do that, you write a store procedure. So that's the usefulness of a store procedure. Once you have it, you can put parameters in it or not put parameters in it. In the previous video that I just talked about earlier in this video, we used a query called getAmounts, and this query doesn't have a parameter. So in the previous video, we don't have a parameter here, and we were able to call it in VBA real easily. Go watch that video if you haven't watched it. So let's get started in this video. What do we want to do in this video? We want to call this store procedure with the parameter in VBA. So let's go to VBA. I have my code right here, and I'm not going to go through this too in depth because I did in the last video. So if you watched the last video, this should be straightforward. What I do here is I declare a string variable called SQL. Well, actually, I don't even need this one this time. Let's see. I don't need this one either. I declare a record set object, an ADODB record set object right here, and I name that variable, that object, RS parameter. I declare a object called CNAccess, which is an object of type ADODB connection. And let me first say what this record set object does. This is going to hold our data that we get back from the store procedure. So when we call that store procedure in VBA, we're going to get some data back. This record set object is going to hold that data. This connection object, CNAccess, is going to tell the database what the connection to the database is. This command object is going to be holding a lot of information, like the store procedure name and the type of SQL command that we want to execute. That's what this does here. So this is an ADODB.command object. I named it CMD command or CMD object. And then what I do is I have this sheet here called databases or database, and I simply select the sheet and I clear the content. So I start with a blank worksheet, and then I take that connection object and I assign it a new ADODB connection. And remember, when you have an object, you have to use the keyword set. If you simply have a variable, you don't need this word. If you have a primitive variable like integer, double, date, you don't need this keyword set. So because I'm assigning to an object, I need the word set, and I assign this connection object a new ADODB connection. Once I have this connection instantiated, this is called instantiating the object. Once I have an instance of it, I can open that connection, and just like in the previous video, you have to pass in two things: the provider, which is equal to Microsoft.ace.oledb 12.0, and the data source, which is the path to the Access database on your computer. So that's all this is, the actual path on which directory your Access database resides in. So mine is in the users directory, in the mark directory, in the documents directory, and then the name of the database is company.accdb. So now I'm ready. Once I have the connection open, so now I'm going to be able to connect to the database. I can set the command object. So I can instantiate the command object here by assigning it a new ADODB command. And remember, you have to use the keyword set. Once I have that command object as a new ADODB command, I'm going to do a couple things with it. So I want to put it in a with statement. Here's the with statement right there. That's the start of it, and here's the end of it. And notice I'm using with CMD object. So that allows me to write some code within the with statement that it applies to this object. So in everything down here, it applies to this object. Now that I'm dealing with this object in this with statement, I want to set the active connection of the object. So I can do that by doing this, set dot active connection. Now this dot active connection is attached to this object right here. So I'm really doing is setting this command object's active connection to CN access, and we know that CN access is the connection up here. Right, that's our connection to our database. So this sets the connection to our database for this command object. Then I tell the database what command type I have, and in this case, because we're using a store procedure, I have to tell it equals AD command store proc. That tells the database we're going to do a store procedure. Now I pass in the name of my store procedure, which is, dot command text. Again, when you see this these dots here, like dot command type, dot command text, those are attached to this object. That's because of the with statement. It allows you to do it, to do the syntax like that. Okay, so now we're setting the command text for this object, and we set it to the name of our store procedure, get amounts parameter. Again, that get amounts parameter is this store procedure in access. So I wrote this store procedure in access. It's right here, and you could actually look at it. Here it is. Again, if you forgot, like 2 minutes ago I showed you this. I wrote this in access, and now in VBA, or actually I wrote it and I saved it as I gave it a name, get amounts parameter. So in VBA I pass in the name I gave it in access, get amounts parameter, and then I have to tell VBA that I'm going to pass in a parameter to this store procedure, and to do that I attach or append a parameter to this command object. And to do that, you do this, dot parameters, dot append, and then dot create parameter. So what this is doing is putting up a parameter into this command object, and that parameter has to be created. And when it's created, you need to pass in the name of that parameter, the type of that parameter, the data type. So the name of this parameter is amount, which equates to that amount you see in access. The type is double, which we saw earlier that I assigned it up here in this parameter button as double. If I close this and close this, let's see, design view. If I go up here, I could show you the data type is double. So in VBA, I have AD double here, and if you put a comma here, you can see all the different types you can select. So I chose double because that's the data type I've set up in Access. And then you can select whether this is an output parameter, a return value, or an input parameter, or parameter unknown. So I know this is an input parameter, meaning I'm passing this in to the store procedure. And then you set the value of this parameter. And the value I'm going to put into this parameter is 400, just like we saw earlier. So you do dot parameters, and then the name of the parameter dot value is equal to 400. And then I can end the with statement, and then I can execute this command object. So just as a summary, this with statement, it's dealing with this command object, and it's doing stuff related to that command object. All this stuff I highlighted is doing stuff with this command object, and specifically these dot command type, dot command text, those are properties or functions or store or sub procedures that you can access using this period here. So when you press this period, you get all types of stuff, all types of properties. Those are little hand things, or functions, which are those green things. All these things you see that popped up here in this little window, those are properties or functions or sub-procedures of this object. Okay, so that's what this with thing does. So we set all that up. We just assigned the command type, the command text, and the parameter to that command object. Now we can set the record set. So remember, this is a record set object. We can set that equal to the command object dot execute. So this right here actually runs the store procedure, and it returns a record set that we assign to our record set object, rs parameter. Once we have that, we could take this record set object and we could put it on the worksheet using this copy from record set property. If I scroll down, this, oops. So this is this function here, copy from record set. It will place the data in this record set rs parameter onto the worksheet in row, whatever row you pass in here, and whatever column you pass in here. So I want to put this record set, all the data in it, in row 2, column 10. So we could run this now if I close access, and I want to put that data in row 2, column 10. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit, and I'm just going to run this. Oh, one thing before I run it, I want to make sure you know that in order to run it, you need to, when you're dealing with Access or any database, Access or SQL, SQL Server, you need to go into Tools, on the Tools menu, go to References, and you need to include this Microsoft ActiveX Data Objects, and then include the highest number library you have. So I have 6.1. You might have 2.8 or something, but include the highest number. You have to have that reference under available references. You have to have that checked off. If you don't have it, search for it by scrolling and then click OK, and check the box and click OK. If you don't have that, you will get an error. So now I can run that because I have that reference and I just set up the code like we did. And if I run it, I get some data in my worksheet. Company 1/1/2013 500. That's the exact same thing that I saw when I ran it in Access and I put in the value 400. I got one row, so company 1/1/2013 500. So I'm seeing the same results. That's what I see in Access when I run the store procedure, and now in VBA, here's the same result, right? Cool. So now we know how to run store procedures in Access with parameters. Now, I'm just going to show you the same thing I showed you in the other video, which is how to loop through that record set. Sometimes you want to do that for whatever reason. And in the last video, I told you after you execute or after you use this copy from record set function, behind the scenes, you don't see it, and you didn't write any code, but behind the scenes what happens is this record set is being looped through so it can be put on the worksheet. And when it's looped through, it goes through every row in the record set. So that since there's only one row here, it goes through this row and then it finishes. It goes to the next. There's a flag in the record set called end of file, and it sets that flag equal to true. So it basically looped through the record set to put it onto the worksheet, and then it sets a flag end of file equal to true. And then when you want to loop through it here, like so I want to loop through it, I want to loop through this record set. But the end of file up here is set to true. I need to go back to the top of the record set, and that's what this thing does here. Well, let me just put a watch on here real quick, and I could show you that in memory, I put a watch on that record set object, and you could see in memory here's that end of file means that's a property that attached to that record set object, and when it's set to true, it means that there's no records in the record set, and that's because this copy from record set was just used. And like I told you, when that is used, it after it puts the record set on the worksheet, it sets that end of file to true. Once I do this, rs parameter.move first. If I just step over it, now if I look at that record set again, you could see the end of file is set to false. So that bit of code right here, move first, allows me to continue to use the record set in VBA. Like I said, if you just want to put it on the worksheet, you could stop here. But if you want to use this record set after you use this copy function, you need to do this move first, or else you're going to be like, oh, the record set's blank, I'm not getting anything. So now we can loop through it. And we're going to loop through it until that rs parameter.eof field is true. Right now it's set to false, but when you loop through a record set, it's going to set that EOF property to true when it gets done looping through it. And how do you loop through it? You do rs parameter.move next. So here's my loop to loop through a record set, and here's my sort of iterator. How do I iterate over this record set? You do rs parameter.move next. And then how do you access the fields in the record set? Just like in the last video, you do rs parameter, there's my record set, and then to access the fields you use an exclamation point, and then you can put the name of the field, which is company. And again, that name of that field is this thing here, company. I could do business date or amount or whatever, but I'm just going to do company. And now I can loop through this record set. So I could hit play, and I have a message box that says company 1. Why do I see that? Because I put a message box around the field company for this record set, and that record set is what you see in your worksheet right there. And the company, the only company there is company 1. So then we're done looping through the record set in VBA, and we close the record set here, and then we set the record set equal to nothing just to clear your memory out, and then the sub is over, the subroutine is over. So let me go into Access again. Once I'll just run this again. I'll show you the table, and let's make the value 300, our parameter value that we pass in. So if I go down here to get amount parameter, go to design view, and I run it. Now if I do 300, I see 3 rows. All the amounts are great. All the amounts I see are greater than 300, 500, 400, 400. If I go to Excel, I should see 3 rows here when I run it. And I'll go back here, and I'm just going to run this. Before I run it, I'm going to change the value of the parameter I pass into 300. And now when I run it, sure enough, I see those 3 rows, the same 3 rows I saw in Access, 500, 400, 400. And now I have these message boxes that are popping up. The first one says company 1, the second one says company 2, and the third one says company 4, and then my subroutine is done. So that's all I wanted to show you in this video. Now you're able to connect to Access with using store procedures that have parameters in them, and you can add multiple parameters by doing if you have 2 parameters, you want to copy these 2 lines and change the names here and the types if they're different types. So if you have 2 parameters, amount 1 and amount 2, you would do amount 1 here and amount 1 here, and you would set the value, and then you would just copy these 2 lines and do amount 2 and amount 2, and you could have as many parameters as you want. So that's how you would do parameters. If you want to know how to insert into Access, how to delete Access, how to delete rows in an Access database, how to update rows in an Access database, how to simply select from an Access database, then you want to watch this video here, which is the one I mentioned earlier, lesson 24 on Excel, VBASQL.com, under the VBA videos library here. Click on that. So that's it for this video. Once again, go to Excel, VBASQL.com, go to this VBA videos and check out all the videos. The tutorial here is really good. It'll get you up to speed. And then if you really want to get up to speed the fastest way possible is to take the live VBA online class, and you're going to get loads and loads of code that you can play around with after the class is done. And you're also going to be exposed to real world problems, real world solutions, and someone who can teach you it at a very understandable way, but you're going to learn the advanced stuff. So Until then, email me with questions and I'll get back to you. All right, bye.